Hey everybody! Oh, I'm getting a bit ill. I wasn't expecting to sound that croaky when I started talking. Yeah, I seem to have just come down with something like today. Pretty much woke up with it this morning. I've got a bit of a chesty cough. I just sound a bit croaky. But it doesn't matter because it's 1 week till Christmas. I can power through. I'll be fine. So I thought I'd let you know my tips that I was given last week. So they were 5 ways to shop for last minute Christmas presents without any waste, or at least very minimal waste. So there were 5 different ways to get presents, low waste, last minute, and I successfully managed to do all of my Christmas shopping since I'd done that live to right now using those tips. So I only went to a shop for a couple of bits. So I went and got some bits and bobs food that were in recycled packaging, but other than that, everything else I didn't have to go Christmas shopping for. I didn't have to go into loads of different shops. It was very easy, it was very simple, and everything that I've purchased for people's Christmas presents, very low waste. Hurrah! So I feel good about that, and I feel really jammy that I managed to do it all sort of mid-December. Well, I guess it's early December I managed to do them all, but I feel great that I didn't, I left things to last minute, and normally in zero waste living it's all about plan. You have to plan, otherwise you'll create waste when you don't mean to. And this was quite a nice little accomplishment to think like, oh, I didn't necessarily have to plan so far in advance and I didn't end up wasting loads of stuff. So if you missed last week's live, check it out. You can either just go further down the Facebook feed, or you can go on to our YouTube channel, so just search for A Zero Waste Life, and it will be the latest video that's uploaded there. So yeah, 1 week to go till Christmas. I love Christmas. And I was having a chat with my friend the other day, and she was like, oh, I'm so glad you still love Christmas as much as you always have done, because Christmas is such a wasteful time of year. And she was like, I was worried that you'd almost find it really overwhelming and really annoying. I'm like, no, not at all. Like, my Christmas has definitely changed, and I definitely focus on different things now than I used to, but that's also just part of growing up, right? Like, I've known this friend since we were at college, and when we were back at college, we used to just buy each other plasticky tat, like, with our pocket money that we used to get. And it's just something that you do when you're a teenager and then you grow out of it, or at least it's what we used to do. So, like, going zero waste has affected my life in so many ways, and it's the same around Christmas time. Like, it makes me focus a lot more on the people I spend time with and traditions that aren't necessarily wasteful. And I have had to adopt some different ways of buying presents, of wrapping presents, of stating my intentions around waste, and having to be aware of when I can reduce waste better than other people, maybe when I have more knowledge about reducing waste than other people might, or yeah. So it's like every other element of a zero waste living. It's hard, but if you plan ahead, you can do it. So these tips that I've got for you tonight are some of those planning ahead tips. So they're basically ways that you should be able to cut back on food waste. So I mentioned this last week, but this time of year, we typically throw away 30% more of everything than the rest of the year. So in terms of food waste, we throw away 30% more food at this time of year. And in the UK, a third of all our food ends up in landfill anyway. So that's a massive waste of resource in terms of all that energy. And I do mean like physical energy, but I also mean water, land space, everything that goes into creating food. And then this food gets grown over many months, and then it gets distributed to us, and then it's in supermarkets, and then we go and buy that, and then it sits at the back of our fridge until it goes off, and then we throw it away. That happens with 30% of our food in the UK, which is just atrocious when we think about how many people don't have access to that sort of food. And I know it's not a black and white scenario, and I know it's not like, oh, I've got slightly mouldy carrots in my fridge, I can give it to somebody else who doesn't have any food. I know it's not that simple, but these kinds of tips that I'm going to be giving you, whilst they are relevant for the period of festivities, they are definitely tips that you can take forward into the rest of your life. So they are general food waste reduction tips, with some festive twists to them. So if you are watching these tips live, just give me a hashtag live, and if you're watching on replay, give me a hashtag replay. And if you want to join in the conversation, I would absolutely love it. So if you've got additional tips that you think I'm glossing over, maybe you've got your own stories of when you've used one of these tips really well, please write a comment. And if you are watching live, I will have a chat with you right now. So I have got 5 tips here. I didn't want to push the 5-tip thing though, because my last 3 weeks videos have all been like 5 tips in this. And I was like, why do I only work in groups of 5? Anyway, so yeah, I've got 5 tips, and the first one sort of starts from the food purchasing. And I know that some of you guys out there will be like, I've already bought all my food, like I bought it ages ago. Some of you, now might be the sort of time that you're thinking, I'm going to go out and buy my food for the big day. Some of you will leave it to last minute. So take it as you will. Like I said, these are festive tips, but they're also tips that can be used throughout the rest of the year as well. Okay, so tip number 1 is a really similar one to what I gave last week in terms of reducing Christmas waste. It's to buy less. So to buy less food. But in terms of when you're buying festive food, there always seems to be certain offers on, certain discounts if you buy a set amount of food, or buy one get one free, all of this sort of stuff. Only go for those offers if they are actually going to save you money, or if you know you are actually going to eat that food, because if you're not, then you'll just end up with more than you need, and then that will be the stuff that goes to waste. Having said that, if you know you can buy more and then you can freeze it and you can give it away, whatever, go for it. Just don't be that person who ends up with like 45 pigs in blankets because you were like, oh, they were on offer. And then you realise that, after Christmas Day, who are you going to eat it with? Because it's pretty much just you at home. Like, if that's you, steer clear from those offers. And I know that this is common sense. I know this first tip is like, you're like, this isn't even about zero waste. This is just about adult life. But write yourself a shopping list, stick to the shopping list, and you will waste less, because you will know what you need to buy and you'll go and buy that stuff, and then it won't be wasted. Winning. The next tip is about storing that food. So when you've bought it and you're bringing it back home, be conscious about where you're storing the food to make sure that it doesn't go off. So if you get stuff home, like if you are a meat eater and you could freeze that meat to save some extra space in the fridge, and then you could defrost it in time, go for that. If you've got like root vegetables, and maybe you're somebody who normally will put that stuff in the fridge, but actually you could put it in a dark place, like in a bag, in a cupboard, or if you've got a garage or whatever, and you can put that food there. Root vegetables store really well during the winter, and they store really, really well in dark conditions like that. So in terms of root veg, I'm on about like parsnips, I'm on about potatoes, and sprouts. Even though they're not root veg, they store well in that kind of environment as well. What I would say is, if you're not sure, just literally Google it and be like, how do I store this food? How can I make it last longer? Because you really don't want anything to go off before Christmas. That would just be heartbreaking. And obviously there's some things that you're like, oh, it's Christmas, we want to do something a little bit fancy. But if you know that whilst a festive fruit bowl would look super duper cute, but nobody's really going to eat it, it's probably not the thing to buy. Or at least buy less of it, and then hopefully everything will get eaten and happy days. So the next tip is sort of like fast forwarding to Christmas Day itself, or just after Christmas Day. So plan what you're going to do with leftovers, because it's really likely that even if you have a good shopping list and you only buy what you need and you store your food really well, it's likely that you're still going to have some leftovers, because it's Christmas. It's kind of what we do around this kind of time of year. We cook too much and then we eat too much, but there's still leftovers. So have a strategic plan as to what you're going to do with that food. If you know that there's enough for you to sort of eat on Boxing Day, 27th, that's its real name. If you know you have enough food to get you through, like you don't have too much food, extra food, you can get through those few days, then, you know, store it in the fridge, put it in boxes, store it like you normally would store leftovers like that. All grand. If you have more than that, start to think, okay, could I portion this stuff up and put it in the freezer? Should I be separating different bits out, like separating the veg and the meat out so that I can put them into separate dishes? Whatever it might be that you need to plan around in order to make sure that that food doesn't end up in the bin. And one of the big reasons why food going in the bin is so awful for waste. So I've already talked about it just being an intensive waste of resource. When food goes into the landfill, I was always under the impression that food that went into landfill would compost like it would in a normal composter in your garden. So I'd imagined like, oh, okay, it doesn't really matter, because if I put like the seeds of a pepper, the centre of a pepper into the landfill, it would just break down like a compost would. But that's not the case at all. So when fruit and veg go into a composter, there's enough oxygen that can circulate through the composter, and there are all the bugs and the insects that come and munch on this stuff, and the worms, like the specific type of worm where they just basically love living in compost, and they start to digest all of this food, and then they start to poop it out, and that makes soil. That doesn't happen in landfill because everything is so tightly compact that that oxygen can't get through. There isn't those mini beasts, insects, to start eating all that food waste. So essentially, the food is trapped in the landfill with all this other rubbish, and it begins to release methane. And we all know that methane is awful for the planet, so it's the reason why cows are so bad for our planet, because they they fart out methane, and it's a greenhouse gas and it's warming our environment. And it's the same thing happening when you put food into the landfill. So everything you can do to reduce food going into landfill is brilliant. So if you do have a composter that you can compost food waste in, excellent. If you have a food collection point in your community, brilliant. The best thing though to do is to eat food before it comes to food waste, or to prep by buying less and using up your leftovers. And the reason why that's better is because you've spent your hard-earned money on that food. You may as well eat it rather than feed it to bugs. Pretty much. So yeah, we've talked about sort of freezing, preparing yourself to make sure that you're not wasting this food. and the next one is about that food, what to make that food into. So I found some nice sounding, I don't know, but no, I was basically trying to find the weirdest things I could find that you could use your Christmas leftovers for. So there is a recipe online for Brussels sprout cake pops, chocolate cake pops. I don't mind sprouts, like they're okay. I will have them around the Christmas season, but if you really love them, you can make them into chocolate cake pops. If you do, please let me know how they are, because I'm not going to try that one myself. I also found a recipe for bread sauce croquettes, which I thought was quite fancy. And I'm going to have to read this one. So it's called Clump, and it is a German dish that uses up potatoes, like leftover potatoes, and you can also whack in all sorts of other root veg that you might have as well. So they were my 3 favourite sounding ones. I know like lots of various other people do things like turkey curries. My brother made one, a really good one, back in the days where we ate meat. And it was delicious. You know, they fill a good sandwich. There's turkey and cranberry sauce and bread sauce, all of that sort of stuff. You know, you don't need to go completely overboard. But when I was searching today for those weird sounding recipes, there was absolutely plenty online in terms of normal recipes, basically, like ways to use up Christmas leftovers so that you don't have to be throwing it away. So like salads you can make, pastas you can make with like chestnuts and sprouts and all sorts of lovely things. So check it out if you need some inspiration. And then the final one is to give your food away. So if you had people to come over for Christmas Day, you can send them on their merry way with a little doggy bag that you've made up. Or if you have surplus, I think this is going to work better if you have surplus uncooked food. So I'm thinking if you bought too many carrots, if you bought too many sprouts, maybe you got them in a bag and you got much more than you needed, but you don't want that food to go to waste. Check out the app called Olio, and it's spelled Olio. I'm not very good at spelling, so I hope I spelled that right. Check it out. What it does is it shows you a map of where you live, and then it shows you like surplus food that your neighbours have, basically, and you can go around to your neighbour's house and you can pick up their surplus food. So it might be that they have too many peppers and you can go and get a couple of peppers rather than go into the shop, and it's free. It's surplus food, they're getting rid of it, and then you can post on there the food that you want to get rid of. So the reason why it works better for uncooked food is you don't want to, I mean, you could be like, oh, I've got a plate of Christmas dinner, anyone want it? But it's going to work a bit better if you're like, oh, we've got a jar of this that we don't need, or we've got root veg that we don't need, anyone want it? And obviously you can post this before or after Christmas. It's a really brilliant app, and it's one of those apps where the more people use it, the better it gets. I'm going to just put a little disclaimer in here. I've not been sponsored to say this. I just think it's a really good app, and it's, you know, in line with my values in terms of making sure food doesn't go in the bin, and stuff doesn't go to waste when it's perfectly edible. So, so check it out. Get yourself registered on there, and then post up any surplus food that you have that you don't want to go to waste. So those were my 5 ways to to cut Christmas food waste, basically. If you have any additional ones that I've missed out, let me know. Sharing is caring, you know, especially at this time of year. So pop it in the comments, and then everybody else who watches this video, either now or when they watch it on replay, they'll be able to see your extra special suggestion. I am taking 2 weeks off these lives, so I'm not going to do a live on Christmas Day. Weird, right? I'm also not going to do one on New Year's Eve, because I'm hoping to be drunk on both of those, if I'm perfectly honest with you. So I'll be starting back in January, and they will be January themed lives. So like I'm going to be covering decluttering and exercise and just making January not as awful as January can sometimes be. But I wanted to wish you a really Merry Christmas. So this is the 12th live that I have done. And honestly, these lives used to scare me senseless back at the start. Like, I used to feel so awkward just being me talking to myself. And I've absolutely loved sharing, really, like sharing the thoughts that I have, and it's given me a really nice place to be able to show other people how passionate I am about zero waste living, and to make it hopefully easier for more people to get on board, because I think that's the thing that's really hard about zero waste living. People think it's all or nothing. Like, the term zero waste sounds really like ultimate. Like, it seems like if you're not going to do it all, don't fricking bother. And whilst when I started my zero waste journey, that was definitely the mindset I had, which then meant I was almost setting myself up for unrealistic goals, like stuff that just isn't possible. When you live in a world where it's not zero waste and you're trying to be zero waste, you're always going to come up against tricky situations. So I'm very much, because of my change around mindset, I'm very much the kind of person who thinks, no, zero waste living isn't all about doing everything. It isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's actually about focusing on key things that you can do, and you can do really well, and you can sustain them over a long period of time and make actual habit changes. And then it's about taking those habit changes, showing other people how easy they are, and then spreading the message on. And then that is how we make a change, and that is how we reduce landfill waste. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. And I'll see you in January. And I just hope you have a really fantastic break. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. Take care. Bye. Oh, I didn't